Medical reports insist that nobody survives a bullet to the gut in a blizzard, miles from civilization. Yet, Kristen Rossi, the ghost of Chicago, a man whose signature was usually written in blood, defied death that night. His survival wasn't luck. It was due to a struggling waitress who performed the unthinkable to keep America's most dangerous man breathing. In saving him, she didn't just preserve a life. She signed a binding contract with fate. Discover what happens when the wolf falls for the lamb in the night of the whiteout. A true story with a twist ending you won't see coming. The wind off Lake Michigan was screaming like a banshee, rattling the single-pane windows of Saul's Diner so hard it seemed the glass would finally give up the ghost. It was 2:00 a.m. on a Tuesday in February. The kind of cold that hurts your teeth. Victoria Mitchell was 24, tired and leaking through her shirt because her breast pump was broken, and she was 3 hours past her scheduled break. Her 6-month-old son, Toby, was at home with her mother, likely sleeping soundly while Victoria wiped grease off a Formica counter that hasn't been truly clean since the Reagan administration. Sal's Diner wasn't the kind of place anyone went for the food. It sat on the edge of the Cicero border, a no-man's land where the streetlights flickered and the police cruisers didn't slow down. They served trucker coffee, tar black, and strong enough to strip paint and silence. Victoria, honey, close up the register. Ain't nobody coming out in this storm. Sal grunted from the kitchen. He was a good man. He paid her in cash under the table because he knew her ex-husband, a man whose name still made her hands shake, would garnish anything that hit a bank account. Just finishing the count. Sal, she called back. She had $42 in tips, enough for formula and maybe a new box of diapers if she went to the discount store. Victoria rubbed her chest, wincing. The physical pain of weaning was nothing compared to the ache of leaving Toby every night. But survival didn't care about feelings. She flipped the sign on the door to closed and locked the deadbolt. The storm outside had turned the world into a white void. You couldn't see the car in the parking lot 5 feet away. That's when she heard it, not the wind. A thud, heavy, wet, and deliberate, like a sack of wet cement hitting the back alley door. Sal was already gone, having slipped out the side exit to his truck. Victoria was alone. Don't open it. Victoria! Her brain screamed. This is Chicago. This is how you die. But then came the groan, a low, guttural sound of a man who had accepted the end. It sounded so much like her father before the cancer took him that her body moved before her common sense could stop it. She unlocked the back door and pushed it open against the drift of snow. He was a mountain of a man, collapsed face down in the slush. He was wearing a suit that cost more than her life Italian wool. Bespoke fit now, ruined by the dark, viscous stain spreading across his lower back. "Hey," she hissed, dropping to her knees. The cold soaked through her jeans instantly. "Can you hear me?" He rolled over, even in the dim light of the alley. His face was striking. Sharp angles, a jawline that could cut glass, and eyes that were glazed over but burning with a terrifying intensity. He looked like a fallen angel, or maybe a rising demon. "Don't. Hospital," he wheezed. His hand, stained red, gripped her wrist. His skin was freezing. "No. Cops." "You're shot," Victoria said, her voice trembling. "You're bleeding out." "No. Cops," he repeated, his eyes rolling back. "Cellar." He passed out. She should have left him. She should have called 911 and ran. But the tattoo peeking out from his blood-soaked collar stopped her. It was a black crest, a double-headed hawk holding a key. Victoria knew that crest. Everyone in the neighborhood knew it. It belonged to the Rossi family. Specifically, it was the mark of the Capo dei Capi. This wasn't just a gangster. This was Kristen Rossi. The newspapers called him the Butcher. But on the streets, they just called him the King. And if the King was dying on her doorstep, whoever shot him was probably close behind. If she called the cops, his enemies would find out. If she left him, he died. If she helped him, she was probably dead anyway. "Damn it," she whispered. She grabbed him under the arms. He was dead weight, easily 200 pounds of muscle. Adrenaline is a hell of a drug. She dragged him, inch by agonizing inch, into the diner's storage room. The storage room was freezing, but it was safer than the main floor. Victoria locked the heavy steel door and propped a sack of potatoes against it. She tore open his shirt. The bullet had gone through the side of his abdomen. It looked like a through and through, which was good. But he had lost a lot of blood. She used clean bar towels and duct tape the poor man's stitches to bind the wound tightly. He woke up with a gasp when she poured vodka on the wound. "Quiet!" She clamped a hand over his mouth. "You're safe, but you have to be quiet." He blinked, his grey eyes focusing on her. He stopped struggling. Victoria removed her hand. "Who are you?" His voice was like gravel. "The waitress who just saved your life. You're welcome." He tried to sit up and groaned, falling back against the sacks of flour. "Water. I don't have water in here. The pipes in the back froze yesterday. I have pickle juice." He shook his head, his face turning an alarming shade of grey. He was shivering violently now. Hypothermia. Shock. "Sugar," he whispered. "Need sugar." "Diabetic." Victoria's heart stopped. He wasn't just bleeding out, he was crashing. A hypoglycemic shock combined with blood loss. "I have soda in the front," she said, standing up. "No time," he gasped, his hand clutching his chest. He was convulsing. His eyes were fluttering shut. Fading. She looked around frantically. They were locked in a dry storage room. Flour, potatoes, canned beans. Nothing with quick sugar. Nothing liquid. If she went out to the front, and whoever shot him was watching the place. He seized. A violent, rigid spasm. "Hey, stay with me." She slapped his cheek. He didn't respond. His breathing was shallow, rapid. He was dying. Right now, he needed fluids and nutrients, immediate calories to stop the crash, or his heart would stop before the ambulance could even get through the snow. Victoria looked down at herself. Her shirt was damp. The pain in her chest was sharp and throbbing. She froze. The realization hit her like a physical blow. It was insane. It was taboo. It was the only thing in this room that could save him. Breast milk is high in sugar. It's pure calories, antibodies, and fluids. It's designed to keep a human alive when nothing else can. She looked at the dying man, the feared Mafia don. He looked so young now, stripped of his power, just a dying animal in the dark. She thought of Toby. If she didn't go home tonight, Toby would be an orphan. If this man died here, his people would burn this diner down looking for answers. "God forgive me," she whispered. Victoria moved closer to him. She cradled his heavy head in her lap. He was barely conscious. His lips blue. "Drink," she whispered, her face burning with a shame and intensity she couldn't name. "You have to drink." She unbuttoned her uniform top. It wasn't sexual. It was desperate. It was primal. It was the terrified act of a mother trying to save a life because she knew the value of one. She guided him. At first, he didn't react. Then, instinct took over, the most basic human instinct there is. He drank. It was strange, the silence of the storage room, the howling wind outside, and the rhythmic sound of a grown man, a killer, feeding like a newborn. She stroked his hair, tears streaming down her face. She hummed the lullaby she sang to Toby. Lavender's blue. Dilly, dilly. Lavender's green. Minutes passed. It felt like hours. Slowly, the color began to return to his cheeks. The shivering stopped. His breathing deepened, becoming less ragged. The sugar and the warmth were working. He pulled away slowly, his head resting heavily on her thigh. He didn't open his eyes immediately. He just breathed, his hand coming up to rest on her knee. When he finally opened his eyes, the glaze was gone. He looked up at her, and the expression on his face wasn't lust. It was something far more terrifying. It was absolute religious awe. He reached up, his rough thumb wiping a tear from her chin. "Did you?" He started, his voice stronger now. He looked at her disheveled shirt, then back to her eyes. He realized what had happened. Victoria hurriedly buttoned her shirt, her face bright red. "You were dying. You were crashing. It was all I had." He didn't mock her. He didn't make a crude joke. Kristen Rossi, the butcher of Chicago, looked at her like she was the Virgin Mary herself. "You saved me," he said softly, "with your own body. I just did what I had to do." "What is your name?" he asked. "Victoria." He repeated it, testing the weight of it on his tongue. "Victoria." Suddenly, a loud crash came from the front of the diner, glass shattering, heavy boots on the linoleum, men shouting in Russian. Kristen's face changed instantly. The awe vanished, replaced by the mask of the monster. He struggled to sit up, wincing, but his strength had returned. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a gun she hadn't seen before. "Victoria," he whispered, grabbing her hand. "Listen to me closely. Those men are the Volkovs. They are here to finish the job." "What do we do?" She was shaking again. "There is a vent behind these shelves," he pointed. "It leads to the alley. You go. Run. Do not go home. Go to the St. Jude's Cathedral on 5th. Ask for Father Ricci. Tell him the hawk has landed." "Can you do that? I'm not leaving you. You have a child, don't you?" He glanced at her chest. She nodded. "Then go. If you stay, you die. If you go, you keep your baby safe." He pressed a cold, heavy gold ring into her palm. It had the crest on it. "Take this. If anyone touches you, you show them this. Now go." He shoved her toward the shelves. Victoria scrambled up the crates, popping the vent cover. She looked back one last time. Kristen was propped up against a sack of flour, aiming his gun at the door, a feral grin on his face. He looked ready to die. "Victoria," he hissed. "Yeah, I owe you a life, and a Rossi always pays his debts." She crawled into the vent just as the storage room door exploded inward. Gunfire erupted, deafening and bright. Victoria scrambled through the metal tunnel, dropping out into the snow-filled alley. She didn't look back. She ran. She ran until her lungs burned and her legs felt like lead. She didn't know it then. But that night was the easy part. The hard part was what came next, because Kristen Rossi didn't die in that storage room, and he never forgot the taste of the woman who saved him. 3 years is a long time to hold your breath. Victoria never went to St. Jude's Cathedral. She never asked for Father Ricci. When she scrambled out of that vent into the alley, listening to the gunfire that surely marked the end of Kristen Rossi. Fear had rewritten her DNA. She didn't trust priests. She didn't trust cops. And she certainly didn't trust the ghost of a dead mobster. She ran. She packed Toby into her rusted 2008 Honda Civic and drove until the transmission gave out in a gritty neighborhood on the south side, miles away from Sal's diner. She dyed her hair from blonde to a dull, mousy brown. She started going by her middle name. June, she became a ghost in her own life. Now, 3 years later, Toby was a rambunctious 4-year-old with her eyes and a laugh that was the only bright thing in her world, and she was drowning. $40, the pawnshop owner grunted, tossing her mother's silver locket back onto the glass counter. It's sterling, Victoria argued, her voice tight. It's vintage. Please, Mr. Henderson, I need 50. Just 50 for the electric bill. 40. Take it or leave it. June. She took it. She had to. The final notice was bright pink and sitting on her kitchen counter. As she walked out into the grey Chicago drizzle, her hand went to her pocket. Her fingers brushed against the heavy, cold metal she kept hidden in the lining of her coat. The ring, the Rossi ring. For 3 years, she had carried it. It was worth thousands, maybe more. It was solid gold, heavy enough to sink a ship. She could have sold it and started a new life in Florida. She could have bought Toby a yard to run in, but she couldn't do it. Every time she looked at it, she saw his eyes, grey, burning, and vulnerable. She remembered the weight of his head on her lap in that freezing storage room. She remembered the intimacy that was so bizarre, yet so saving. She kept the ring because, in her darkest moments, she convinced herself it was a talisman. If she had the ring, the monster couldn't hurt her. She turned the corner toward her apartment complex, a crumbling brick building where the elevator never worked, and froze. Leaning against the hood of her car was a man she had prayed she would never see again. Rick, her ex-husband, the man whose gambling debts had ruined their credit, whose temper had left bruises on her soul long before he left them. He looked worse than she remembered. His face was gaunt, his eyes shifting nervously like a rat cornered by a cat. He was wearing a cheap leather jacket that looked 2 sizes too big. Victoria, he grinned, revealing yellowed teeth. He used her real name. The sound of it made her stomach drop. It's June, she said, stepping back, clutching her purse. Go away, Rick. I have a restraining order. Paper doesn't stop a bullet, babe. He laughed, but it was a nervous, jagged sound. He pushed off the car and stepped toward her. And neither do locked doors. I know you're working double shifts at the laundry place. I know you pick up the kid from daycare at 4:30. What do you want? She hissed, checking the street. It was empty. I'm in trouble, Victoria, real trouble. He wiped sweat from his forehead, despite the cold. I owe some people. Big people. The kind of people who don't send bill collectors. They send butchers. That sounds like a you problem, she said, trying to push past him. He grabbed her arm, hard. It's a we problem. Because when I couldn't pay, I told them I had collateral. I told them I had a wife, a pretty one. The blood drained from Victoria's face. We're divorced. They don't care about paperwork, Rick sneered, his desperation turning into aggression. They just want their pound of flesh. I told them you could work it off. Maybe wait tables at one of their clubs. Maybe other things. You were always good at servicing people, right? She slapped him. It was a reflex. Rick's face twisted. He backhanded her, sending her stumbling into the brick wall. Her vision swam. Before she could recover, he had her wrist in a vice grip. "You're coming with me," he snarled. "Tonight. The boss wants to see the merchandise before he agrees to clear my debt." "No!" she screamed, kicking at him. "Toby, I have to get Toby. The kid stays at daycare until we're done. If you behave, you see him tonight. If you run, well, I know where the daycare is too." That threat froze her cold. He would use his own son. He was a monster, desperate and pathetic. "Fine," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Fine. I'll go." She wasn't going because she surrendered. She was going because she had the ring in her pocket. And if these were mobsters Rick owed money to, maybe, just maybe, the ring of the Capo dei Capi meant something. Or maybe it would just get her killed faster. Rick dragged her to his car. They drove in silence into the heart of the city, toward the glittering skyline that hid the rot beneath. They pulled up to a place called the Obsidian. It was a nightclub, sleek and black, with a line of people waiting outside. Rick bypassed the line, sweating profusely, and spoke to a bouncer who looked like he was carved out of granite. The bouncer looked at Victoria, then at Rick, and nodded. He opened a side door. "Downstairs," the bouncer grunted. "Mr. Silvestri is waiting." Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. Silvestri. She didn't know the name. They walked down a long, red-carpeted hallway that smelled of expensive cologne and stale cigar smoke. The bass from the club above thumped in the ceiling, a rhythmic heartbeat of dread. Rick pushed open a heavy mahogany door. They were in an office. It was opulent, filled with dark wood and leather furniture. Behind a massive desk sat a man who looked like a weasel in a silk suit. He was balding, with oily skin and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. This was Silvestri. "Rick," Silvestri purred, leaning back. He didn't look at Rick. His eyes were glued to Victoria. He licked his lips. "You brought her. I'm surprised. I thought you'd run. I'm a man of my word." "Silvio," Rick stammered. "This is Victoria. She's willing to do whatever to clear the slate, just like we discussed. 30 grand. Right?" Silvestri stood up and walked around the desk. He was short, smelling of garlic and heavy musk. He circled her, reaching out a hand to touch a lock of her hair. Victoria flinched. "Feisty," Silvestri chuckled. "I like feisty. 30 grand is a lot of money. Rick, she's going to have to work very hard for a very long time." "She will," Rick promised quickly. "She's great. She's a hard worker." "Take off your coat," Silvestri ordered her. She stood frozen. "I said." Silvestri's voice dropped, losing the veneer of politeness. "Take off the coat. Let's see what I'm buying." Victoria slowly unbuttoned her cheap winter coat. Underneath, she was wearing her waitress uniform from the laundry service, a shapeless blue polo and khakis. Not exactly a seductress. Silvestri frowned. "A bit plain. But we can fix that." He looked at Rick. "Get out. I want to test the merchandise." "Wait," Rick said. "The debt, is it clear?" "Get out." Silvestri roared. Rick scrambled for the door, leaving her alone with the wolf. Silvestri turned back to her, unbuckling his belt. "Now, sweetheart, on your knees." She backed away until she hit the desk. Her hand went into her pocket. She wrapped her fingers around the Rossi ring. It was her only card to play. "Don't touch me," she warned, her voice trembling but loud. "You don't want to do this." Silvestri laughed. "Or what your loser husband is going to save you." "No," she said. "But he might." She pulled the ring out. She held it up in the dim light. The gold caught the lamplight, the double-headed hawk crest gleaming like a warning beacon. Silvestri froze. His eyes went wide. He stopped dead in his tracks, his pants half unbuckled. "Where?" His voice was a whisper. "Where did you get that?" "I earned it," Victoria said, bluffing with every ounce of courage she had. "And the man who gave it to me said that a Rossi always pays his debts." Silvestri's face went pale. He looked at the ring, then at her, trying to calculate the odds. Before he could speak, the mahogany door didn't just open. It was kicked open. Rick flew into the room literally. He was thrown through the air, crashing into the leather sofa. A silence fell over the room, a silence so heavy it felt like gravity had increased. In the doorway stood a man leaning on a black cane topped with silver. He was older than she remembered. There was a jagged white scar running from his temple down to his jaw, cutting through his eyebrow. He was wearing a black suit that absorbed the light, but Victoria knew those eyes. Kristen Rossi, the ghost. He wasn't dead. He was very, very alive, and he looked like he wanted to burn the world down. The air in the room vanished. Kristen Rossi limped into the room. The limp was slight, barely noticeable, but the cane hit the floor with a rhythmic tap, tap, tap that sounded like a countdown. 2 massive bodyguards flanked him, but Kristen didn't need them. He radiated a dark, suffocating power that made Silvestri, who had been a terrifying predator seconds ago, look like a naughty child. Kristen didn't look at Victoria. Not at first. He looked at Silvestri. "Silvio," Kristen said. His voice was deeper, rougher, like smoke over gravel. "I was told you were conducting business in my club. Unsanctioned business." "Boss," Silvestri stammered, frantically buckling his belt. I didn't know you were coming down. This is just small debt collection. Nothing that requires your attention." "Everything requires my attention," Kristen said calmly. He walked over to the desk, picking up a crystal tumbler of scotch. He swirled it, then smashed it against the wall near Rick's head. Rick squealed, curling into a ball on the sofa. "Who is this filth?" Kristen pointed the cane at Rick. "Just a gambler. Boss. A nobody," Silvestri said quickly. "He owes 30 large. Brought his wife to work it off." Kristen's back was to Victoria. He went still. "His wife," Kristen repeated softly. "Yeah, just some broad. Nothing special." Kristen turned slowly. For the first time in 3 years, their eyes met. Time didn't stop. It shattered. Victoria saw the recognition hit him like a physical blow. His grey eyes widened slightly, the pupils dilating. He scanned her face, her brown hair, her terrified posture. He looked at the hand she was clutching to her chest. He saw the ring, his ring. The expression on his face was unreadable to the others, but to Victoria, it was screaming. It was a mixture of disbelief, relief, and a sudden, terrifying possessiveness. He walked toward her. Silvestri, misreading the situation, stepped forward. "She's feisty. Boss. Tried to pull some fake jewelry on me to scare me off. I can handle her for you." Crack. Kristen didn't even look at Silvestri. He swung the heavy silver handle of his cane backward, connecting solidly with Silvestri's nose. The sound of breaking bone echoed in the room. Silvestri dropped to the floor, howling, blood gushing through his fingers. "Speak again," Kristen whispered, "and I will cut out your tongue." Silvestri choked on his own blood and fell silent. Kristen stopped in front of her. He was so tall. Victoria had forgotten how big he was. He blocked out the light, the room, everything. He dropped the cane. It clattered to the floor. He reached out with both hands. His hands were shaking slightly. He cupped her face. His thumbs traced her cheekbones, rough skin against her pale fear. "Victoria," he breathed. It wasn't a question. It was a prayer. "You're alive," she whispered. "Because of you," he said. He looked down at her hand. He gently pried her fingers open to reveal the gold ring. He picked it up. He didn't put it back in his pocket. Instead, he took her left hand. He slid the heavy gold ring onto her thumb. It was too big for her finger. But he curled her fingers around it. "You kept it," he said, his eyes searching hers. "Why didn't you go to the church?" I waited. "For 6 months. I had men watching that church. I thought you were dead. I thought the Volkovs found you." "I was scared," she admitted, tears finally spilling over. "I have a son, Kristen. I couldn't risk it." "A son," he repeated. His gaze darkened. He turned his head slightly to look at Rick, who was shivering on the couch. "Is that the father?" She nodded. Kristen's face hardened into a mask of cold fury. He picked up his cane and walked over to Rick. "You," Kristen said. "Stand up." Rick scrambled up, shaking so hard his teeth chattered. "Look, man, I don't know who you are, but I am the man whose life this woman saved." Kristen said calmly, "I am the man who owes her a debt that can never be fully repaid. And you?" He stepped closer, towering over Rick. "You tried to sell her, like cattle." I didn't know, I swear," Rick pleaded, looking at Victoria. "Victoria, tell him we were just working it out. She is not Victoria to you anymore," Kristen said. "She is untouchable." Kristen turned to his guards. "Take him." "What?" "No." Rick screamed as the 2 massive men grabbed him by the arms. "Victoria, help me!" Victoria looked at Rick. She thought about the bruises. She thought about him dragging her here. She thought about him threatening to leave Toby at daycare. She looked at Kristen. "Don't kill him," she said softly. Kristen paused. He looked at her, surprised. "He sold you." "He's Toby's father," she said. "If you kill him, my son has to grow up knowing his father was murdered. I don't want that for him. Just make him go away." "Far away." Kristen studied her for a long moment. He nodded. "You heard the lady," Kristen said to the guards. "He leaves Chicago tonight. If he ever steps foot in Illinois again, if he ever mentions her name, if he ever breathes in her direction, bury him." The guards dragged a sobbing Rick out of the room. Silvestri was still whimpering on the floor. Kristen stepped over him like he was a piece of trash. "We are leaving," Kristen said to her. He held out his hand. "Leaving?" she asked. "Where?" "To my home," he said. "You aren't safe here. Silvestri has a big mouth. People will know you had the ring. The Volkovs are still looking for the mystery woman who helped me escape that night." "I can't just leave," Victoria said. "I have to pick up Toby. I have a job. I have an apartment." Kristen stepped closer, invading her space again. The smell of sandalwood and expensive tobacco filled her senses. "You don't have a job," he said intensely. "You don't have an apartment. You have me." He leaned down, his lips brushing her ear. I tasted life because of you. Victoria, I survived because you gave me part of yourself. Do you think I'm going to let you go back to a pawn shop? Do you think I'm going to let you struggle? He pulled back to look her in the eye. You own me, Victoria, and I take care of what belongs to me. I don't belong to you, she said, trying to find her backbone. No, he agreed, a small, dangerous smile touching his lips. But I belong to you, and that makes you the queen of this city, whether you want to be or not. Now, let's go get your son. He took her hand. This time, she didn't pull away. As they walked out of the club, past the stunned bouncers and the VIPs, Kristen Rossi didn't let go. He walked with a limp, but he held his head high, and for the first time in 3 years, Victoria didn't feel like a ghost. But as she sat in the back of his armored limousine, watching the city blur by, she realized something terrifying. She had saved his life with milk and mercy. Now, he was going to consume hers with fire and gold. And the worst part, she wasn't sure if she wanted to run anymore. The daycare was a brightly colored storefront, sandwiched between a liquor store and a payday loan shack. It smelled of bleach and graham crackers, a scent that usually calmed Victoria. But today, with a cavalcade of 3 black SUVs idling at the curb, it smelled like a target. Stay in the car, Kristen ordered. He didn't look like a man recovering from a 3-year-old gunshot wound, or a man who had just crippled a subordinate. He looked like a king inspecting his borders. No, she said, her hand on the door handle. He doesn't know you. If a strange man walks in there with those guys, she gestured to his hulking bodyguards, he'll scream. Kristen looked at her. For a second, the mask slipped. He looked almost unsure. Fine, he grunted. We go together, but you stay behind me. They walked in. The receptionist, a teenager named Sarah who spent 90% of her time on TikTok, dropped her phone. Her eyes went from Victoria's bruised cheek to Kristen's bespoke suit, and then to the terrifying bulge under his jacket. I'm here for Toby, Victoria said, her voice shaking. Sure. Victoria. Sarah stammered. Get the boy, Kristen said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of a command that couldn't be refused. A moment later, Toby came running out, holding a plastic dinosaur. He stopped when he saw them. He saw the bruise on Victoria's face first. Mummy! He ran to her, burying his face in her legs. You have a boo-boo. I'm okay, baby. We have to go. Toby looked up at Kristen. Most kids would be scared. Kristen Rossi was a terrifying figure, scarred, towering, dressed in black. But Toby just stared at him with wide, curious eyes. Are you a giant? Toby asked. Kristen froze. The man who had face down hit squads, and federal indictments looked completely paralyzed by a 4-year-old in Spider-Man sneakers. Slowly, painfully, slowly. Kristen crouched down. He was eye level with her son. No, Kristen said, his voice surprisingly soft. I'm just a friend of your mother's. You have a cool stick. Toby pointed to the cane. It helps me walk, Kristen said. I got hurt once. Your mum helped me. My mum fixes everything, Toby said matter-of-factly. Yes. Kristen looked up at Victoria, his eyes burning with that same intensity from the storage room. She does. They left the daycare. Kristen didn't let the bodyguards carry Toby. He didn't carry him either. He walked beside him, matching his slow, limping pace to Toby's short strides, shielding him from the street. with his own body. They didn't go to her apartment. They went to the Gold Coast. The Rossi penthouse was less of a home and more of a fortress in the sky. Private elevator, bulletproof glass, a view of Lake Michigan that cost more than Victoria's entire lifetime of earnings. "This is too much," she whispered as they stepped into a marble foyer that was bigger than her entire apartment. "It's safe," Kristen said, locking the heavy steel door behind them. "The windows are reinforced polycarbonate. The ventilation has independent filtration in case of gas. There are 4 armed men in the lobby and 2 on the roof." "Kristen," she turned to him. Why go through all this? You paid your debt. You saved me from Silvestri. We're even—" He walked over to a wet bar and poured a glass of water. He didn't drink alcohol anymore. She realized. Just water. "We aren't even—" "Victoria," he said, turning to face her. "You didn't just save my life that night. You reset it." He took a step closer. "Do you know what it's like to bleed out in the dark?" he asked softly. "To feel the cold taking your fingers, your toes, your mind. I was dead. I had accepted it. And then, warmth, sweetness, life." He looked at her chest, then quickly up to her eyes, respectful but intense. "I tasted mercy, Victoria, in a world of wolves. You were the only thing that gave me something without asking for a price. I didn't survive just to go back to being a butcher. I survived to find you." "You're scaring me," she admitted. "This obsession. It's not normal." "I never said I was normal," he replied darkly. "I'm a monster who found a reason to breathe. And now that I have you, I am not letting the Volkovs or anyone else take you away." "The Volkovs," she shivered. "Are they really still looking?" "They never stopped. They know someone helped me. They have a witness, a homeless man who saw a woman running from the alley. They've been hunting for a blonde waitress for 3 years. It's why you were safe as June, the brunette. But Silvestri—" Kristen's jaw tightened. "Silvestri talks. He's weak. If the Volkovs get to him, they'll know who you are." "So we're prisoners here," she said, looking around the gilded cage. "No," Kristen said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a black credit card. "You are under my protection. Buy whatever you need. Toby needs clothes, toys, a bed. Order it. My men will bring it up." "I don't want your money. It's not payment," he snapped, frustration flashing in his eyes. "It's care. Let me take care of you. Victoria, please." The please broke her. It was the same tone he used in the storage room when he begged for sugar. For the next 2 weeks, they lived in a bizarre, domestic bubble. Kristen ran his empire from his study, but every evening at 6 p.m. he emerged for dinner. He watched Toby play. He didn't know how to play. He held action figures like they were grenades, but he tried. Victoria started to see the man beneath the monster, the way he winced when he stood up too fast, the way he double-checked the locks 3 times a night. He was traumatized, just like her. But the peace was a lie. They were just waiting for the storm. And it arrived on a Tuesday. It started with a phone call. They were eating breakfast. Pancakes. Kristen was awkward with the syrup, trying not to make a mess on his suit. Toby was laughing at him. It was almost... "Nice." Kristen's burner phone buzzed on the table. He picked it up. "Speak," he said. His face went from relaxed to granite in a split second. "When—" he barked. A pause. "Get the car. Now." He hung up and looked at Victoria. The warmth was gone. The wolf was back. "Get the boy," he said. "Into the safe room. Now." "What's happening?" She stood up, panic seizing her throat. "Silvestri is dead," Kristen said, checking the magazine of a gun he pulled from a kitchen drawer. "They found him in the river this morning. But before he died, they cut him. He talked. Victoria. He told them everything." "Who?" "The Volkovs. They know you're here." Boom. The building didn't shake, but the sound was unmistakable. An explosion. Downstairs, in the lobby. "They're here," Kristen whispered. "They didn't wait for nightfall. They're hitting the building in broad daylight. They're desperate." He grabbed her arm, dragging her and a crying Toby toward the back of the penthouse. He punched a code into a panel hidden behind a painting. A section of the wall slid open to reveal a steel-reinforced panic room. "Stay in here," Kristen ordered. "Do not come out until you hear my voice. If anyone else tries to open this door, use this." He pressed a cold, heavy pistol into her hand. "Kristen, don't go out there." She grabbed his lapel. "I have to buy you time. The police are 10 minutes out. My men are holding the elevator. But the Volkovs have a team coming up the stairs." He looked at her. For a second, he leaned in and kissed her forehead. It was a chaste, desperate kiss. "I promise to pay my debt," he whispered. He sealed the door. Victoria was alone in the dark with Toby and a gun. Outside, hell broke loose. She heard muffled shouting, the thump, thump, thump of suppressed gunfire, the sound of expensive furniture being smashed. Toby was sobbing silently into her shirt. She rocked him, humming the same lullaby she sang to Kristen 3 years ago. Lavender's blue, dilly, dilly. Then silence, long, agonizing silence. Victoria. It wasn't Kristen's voice. It was a voice with a thick, heavy Russian accent. It was coming through the intercom system of the panic room. "Victoria Mitchell, or should I say, Victoria Rossi." She held her breath. "We know you are in there." The voice purred. "We have blown the hinges. We can drill through this door in 5 minutes. But we don't want to kill you." "Not yet." She didn't answer. "We have your protector," the voice said. "Kristen. He is not in good shape. He is bleeding again. Like the night you found him." Her heart stopped. "Open the door, Victoria, and we will let him live. If you don't, we will cut his head off and leave it here for the police." Victoria looked at Toby. She looked at the gun. If she opened the door, they died. If she didn't, Kristen died. But then, the Russian said something that made the world tilt on its axis. "Bring us the boy," the voice said. "Bring us the heir. That is all we want. The Rossi bloodline ends today." She froze. The heir. They thought Toby was Kristen's son. The timeline. The blonde hair. The fact that Kristen Rossi, a man who never let anyone get close, was hiding a woman and a child in his penthouse. To the criminal underworld, there was only one explanation. Toby wasn't just some random kid. They thought he was the secret son of the Don. They thought he was the next king. And in the Mafia, you don't just kill the king. You kill the lineage. A plan formed in Victoria's mind. It was insane. It was suicidal. But it was the only chance they had. They wanted the Rossi heir. She would give them a Rossi. "I'm coming out," she yelled at the door. "Don't shoot, I'm coming out." She turned to Toby. "Baby, listen to me," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Hide in the corner, behind the crates. Do not make a sound. No matter what you hear. Do you understand, Mommy? Hide. She checked the gun Kristen gave her. The safety was off. She wasn't a soldier. She wasn't a killer. She was a waitress. She was a mother. But 3 years ago, she saved a life with her body. Today, she was going to save her son with her rage. She hit the button. The steel door hissed and slid open. Victoria stepped out into the ruined living room. Smoke hung in the air. 3 men in tactical gear lay dead on the floor. In the center of the room, on his knees, was Kristen. His hands were zip-tied behind his back. His face was beaten, blood pouring from a cut above his eye. A massive man, the leader. Volkov himself held a gun to Kristen's temple. Volkov smiled when he saw her. He was a giant, with gold teeth and dead eyes. The nurse, Volkov laughed. And where is the little prince? Victoria held the gun behind her back, hidden in the folds of her dress. He's asleep, she said, her voice surprisingly steady. He's just a boy. He doesn't know anything. He is Rossi blood, Volkov spat. He grows up. He avenges his father. That is the way. Bring him out. Kristen looked up at her. His eyes were pleading. Run, they said. Run. Victoria looked at Volkov. You want a Rossi? She asked. She pulled her hand from behind her back. But she didn't aim at Volkov. She didn't aim at the guards. She aimed the gun at Kristen's head. The room went deadly silent. Volkov looked confused. Kristen's eyes widened. I'm not a Rossi, she spat, channeling every ounce of hatred she had for her ex-husband, for the poverty, for the fear, and neither is my son. This man kidnapped us. He forced us here. She cocked the hammer. You want him dead, she screamed. I want him dead too. He ruined my life. Volkov lowered his gun slightly. Intrigued. A lover's quarrel. He's a monster, she yelled, stepping closer, the gun shaking in her hand, aimed right between Kristen's eyes. He told me he would kill my son if I left. I hate him. Kristen stared at her. And then he saw it. A tiny twitch in her eye. He understood. You bitch, Kristen growled, playing along. After everything I gave you. You gave me nothing but fear. She screamed. She was 3 feet away now, within reach of Volkov. Let me do it, she said to Volkov. Let me kill him, and then you let me and my son go. We disappear. No Rossi heir, no vengeance. Just a dead king. Volkov looked at her, then at Kristen. He laughed. A cruel, barking sound. I like this woman. Volkov grinned. Do it. Kill him, and you walk free. He stepped back, lowering his weapon, enjoying the show. Victoria took a breath. She looked at Kristen. I'm sorry, she whispered. She squeezed the trigger. The silence in the penthouse was louder than the explosion outside. Victoria's hand trembled, the heavy steel of the pistol slick with sweat. Do it, Volkov barked, his eyes gleaming with sick anticipation. End the Rossi line, and you walk free. Victoria looked at Kristen. He was on his knees, blood dripping from his temple, his grey eyes locked on hers. He didn't beg. He didn't plead. He just looked at her with a profound, terrifying acceptance. He was willing to die if it meant Toby and Victoria survived. That was the difference between a boss and a king. I'm sorry, she whispered. Volkov grinned. Victoria squeezed the trigger, but she didn't aim for Kristen's head. At the last fraction of a second, she twisted her wrist. The barrel snapped to the right, finding the center of the Russian's chest. Bang! The sound was deafening. Volkov's grin vanished as the round hammered into his sternum. He flew backward, crashing into the glass coffee table. Now!" she screamed, dropping to the floor. Kristen moved before the echo had even faded. He ignored the zip ties biting into his wrists. He launched himself like a battering ram, shoulder-checking the remaining bodyguard who was raising a rifle toward Victoria. They went down in a heap of limbs and fury. "Toby, stay down!" she yelled, crawling behind the heavy oak sofa. Volkov was groaning on the floor. He was wearing a vest. The shot hadn't killed him, only stunned him. He fumbled for his dropped weapon, his face purple with rage. "You witch!" he wheezed. Victoria didn't hesitate this time. She wasn't a waitress anymore. She was a mother protecting her cub. She fired again. The bullet struck his shoulder, spinning him around. His gun skittered across the floor. Kristen roared, a primal sound that shook the walls. He had headbutted the bodyguard into unconsciousness and was now struggling to stand, his hand still bound behind him. "Victoria, the knife!" he shouted, nodding toward the unconscious guard's belt. She scrambled over, grabbed the serrated combat knife, and slashed through the plastic ties, binding Kristen. The moment his hands were free, he didn't check his wounds. He grabbed Volkov by the collar, dragged him to the broken window, and with a single, brutal motion, ended the war. Silence rushed back into the room. Kristen turned to her. He was battered, bleeding, and terrifying, but when he looked at her, he crumbled. He pulled her into his chest, his grip so tight she could barely breathe. "You crazy, beautiful idiot." He buried his face in her neck. "You could have died." "I told you," she sobbed, the adrenaline finally crashing. "I'm not leaving you." Sirens wailed in the distance. The police were minutes away. Kristen pulled back, his face hardening into business mode. He took the gun from her hand. He wiped it with his shirt, then pressed his own prints all over it. "You didn't shoot anyone," he commanded, his voice leaving no room for argument. "I broke free. I killed them. You were a hostage in the panic room." "But, no," he cut her off. "You are the mother. I am the monster. That is the arrangement. You stay clean, Victoria, always." He walked to the panic room and punched the code. The door slid open to reveal Toby, clutching his plastic dinosaur, eyes wide but unharmed. "Mommy, it's over, baby," she wept, scooping him up. Kristen stood in the doorway, watching them. He looked broken, bloody, and exhausted. But as Toby waved at him, the ghost of Chicago smiled. 6 months later, the wind off Lake Michigan was still cold, but it didn't bite anymore. Victoria stood on the balcony of the Rossi penthouse, wrapped in cashmere, watching the city lights flicker on. "Thinking about the past?" a deep voice asked. Kristen wrapped his arms around her waist from behind. He didn't need the cane anymore, though he still walked with a deliberate, heavy grace. "I'm thinking about how lucky we are," she said, leaning back into him. "Luck had nothing to do with it," he murmured, kissing the side of her neck. "It was milk and gunpowder." "Sounds like a terrible cocktail. It's our cocktail." He turned her around. The bruises were gone. The fear was gone. In its place was a quiet, unshakable power. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "I have something for you," he said. She opened it. Inside lay a deed. Sal's Diner. She looked up, stunned. "I bought the block," he shrugged, looking almost shy. Sal retired to Florida. "I thought, you could turn it into that bakery you used to talk about at 3 a.m., or burn it down. Whatever you want." Tears pricked her eyes. He had remembered. "And," he added, his voice dropping, I have one more thing." He took her left hand. He slid off the heavy gold ring, the one with the hawk crest that had saved her life, and replaced it with a platinum band, set with a diamond as clear as a water. "That first ring was for survival," he said softly. "This one is for life. Marry me. Victoria. Be my wife. Let me be Toby's father for real." Victoria looked at the man who had once bled out on her floor, the man she had saved with her own body, the man who had burned the world down to keep her safe. "Yes," she whispered. He kissed her, and she tasted the storm and the shelter all at once. They say you can't save a bad man. They say you can't turn a wolf into a sheep. They're right. You don't turn the wolf into a sheep. You just become the one thing the wolf loves more than the hunt. And there you have it, the true, twisted ending of Victoria and Kristen, from a desperate act in a freezing storage room to the top of the Chicago underworld. They proved that sometimes the most dangerous love stories are the only ones worth fighting for. Kristen might have been the king, but we all know Victoria wore the crown. If you enjoyed this roller coaster of a story, please hit that like button. It helps the channel so much. And if you want more gripping, true-life storytelling, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. Would you have pulled the trigger? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching.